Hi everyone, it's Tessa. Welcome back to SecretSpool, where we end the week on a high note by sharing stories that warm the heart and remind us of the good in people. Today's story is one of incredible courage, quick thinking, and the kind of community spirit that restores your faith in humanity. Let's jump in. It was an ordinary afternoon in Glenwood, Iowa. The streets were calm. Cars moved leisurely through intersections, and people went about their everyday lives. But for three construction workers driving their company truck, this would turn into a day that tested their courage in ways they never expected. John Lewis, the general manager for Like Construction, had stopped at a quiet intersection. He glanced to his right, expecting nothing more than a passing car or two. Instead, what caught his eye sent a jolt of adrenaline racing through his body. Smoke. Thick, dark smoke curling from the windows of a nearby home. John didn't hesitate. He didn't wonder whether it was his responsibility or wait for emergency sirens. He knew in that moment that people might be inside, and if seconds were wasted, lives could be lost. He shouted for his colleagues, Gabe Record and Damian Pond, who were riding with him. Without hesitation, the three men leapt into action. They pulled their truck over, jumped out, and rushed toward the burning house. Inside, chaos was already brewing. The smoke was suffocating, filling every corner, and the flames had begun to spread with terrifying speed. John pushed through the door first, his construction instincts kicking in. Houses were structures he understood. But this wasn't about beams and walls. This was about people. They quickly found the family: a mother, a grandmother, and a 4-year-old little girl. The women were disoriented, coughing heavily as smoke swirled around them, but the construction crew guided them out with calm authority. "Stay low. Follow me. You're going to be okay," John urged as they made their way to safety. The family stumbled out into the daylight, gulping fresh air, their faces etched with fear, but also immense relief. But just when the men thought the worst was behind them, a sudden explosion shook the house. Flames shot outward like a giant torch, blasting heat and debris toward the workers. Gabe cried out in pain as fire burned across his back and arm. Damian winced, his face seared by the blast. And yet, even as their bodies suffered injury, their focus never wavered. Next door, mechanic John Vandervoort heard the commotion. He stepped outside and quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Above the thick smoke and licking flames, he saw a teenage boy trapped at a second-story window. The boy's face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. He was coughing, struggling to breathe, and there was no way out. The staircase inside was already engulfed. Vandervoort's heart pounded. "He's in trouble, big trouble," he recalled later. John Lewis and his crew also spotted the boy, and desperation surged through them. How could they reach him? The flames made it impossible to go back inside. Every second counted. Then, like a spark of inspiration, John Lewis noticed something in the yard: a trampoline. Without stopping to think about how unusual or risky the idea was, he sprinted over. He yanked it from the ground, dragging it with sheer determination toward the window where the boy clung for dear life. "Jump!" the men shouted. Their voices carried urgency, but also reassurance. They were asking this boy to make a terrifying leap of faith, to throw himself blindly into the unknown and trust that these strangers would catch him. The teenager hesitated. The smoke was thick, the heat overwhelming. He could barely see. Fear gripped him tightly. But as flames crept closer, survival instinct took over. He climbed out onto the sill, his body trembling. "Jump!" "You'll be okay," John yelled, his voice firm, unwavering. Finally, the boy let go. He dropped from the window, crashing onto the trampoline with a bounce. The men steadied the frame, catching him as he rebounded. John pulled him quickly off the trampoline and carried him toward the stop sign, where they had first noticed the smoke. The crowd that had gathered let out a collective gasp of relief. The boy was alive, shaken, coughing, but alive. For a long moment, time seemed to freeze. The teenager, trembling but alive, clung to John as though he might never let go. His mother, grandmother, and little sister, already outside thanks to the workers' quick action, ran forward, tears streaming down their faces. They wrapped their arms around him in a desperate embrace, sobbing into his smoke-stained shirt. Neighbors who had gathered nearby stood in stunned silence before breaking into cheers. Some people covered their mouths in disbelief, while others shouted words of encouragement toward the men who had risked everything. A few even rushed forward with bottles of water, pressing them into the hands of the survivors. It wasn't just relief. It was recognition that they had all just witnessed something extraordinary. In the span of only minutes, strangers had stepped into danger, faced flames head-on, and pulled a family back from the brink of tragedy. As word spread through the small community, more people began arriving. Phones were lifted into the air, not out of idle curiosity, but to document what had happened, to capture proof of the courage that had unfolded before their eyes. The scene was raw and emotional, filled with a mixture of gratitude, shock, and admiration. In the middle of it all, John, Gabe, and Damian tried to downplay their heroics, brushing off pats on the back and words like lifesavers. But their burns and the soot on their faces told the real story. No one watching that day could doubt the bravery they had just seen. For the construction crew, the reality of their injuries began to sink in. Gabe's burns stung sharply across his back and arm. Damian's face throbbed with pain. Yet they brushed it off, more concerned about the family they had saved. Emergency responders arrived soon after, taking over and ensuring everyone received medical attention. The light construction employees were treated for burns and are expected to fully recover. Matt Gray, the Glenwood fire chief, could only shake his head in awe at what had just happened. "They're heroes," he declared. "This could have been a totally different outcome if they wouldn't have stepped up and done what they did." For the family, however, the relief of survival was bittersweet. Though their lives had been saved, their home was destroyed. They were left standing on the curb, clutching one another, with little more than the clothes on their backs. One family member, Ben McGee, described his feelings candidly. "I feel really defeated," he admitted, already worrying about how they would find housing. The weight of loss hung heavy, even amid gratitude for life. But if the fire had taken their home, it had not taken away hope. The bravery of strangers had given them the most precious gift of all, another day together. The community quickly rallied behind both the family and the workers. People offered clothes, food, and temporary shelter. Local officials began organizing resources to help the family rebuild. And for the workers of light construction, recognition was on the horizon. Chief Gray announced that they would be formally honored for their bravery. And they deserved it. Not only for stepping into danger, but for showing the world that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a hard hat, a reflective vest, and steel-toed boots. This story is more than just an incredible rescue. It's a reminder of how ordinary people can become extraordinary in moments of crisis. John, Gabe, Damian, and John Vandervoort didn't wait for someone else to act. They didn't stop to calculate the risks. They saw lives in danger and chose to step forward. It also speaks to the importance of community. While firefighters and first responders are essential, everyday citizens are often the first on the scene. Their courage can mean the difference between tragedy and survival. Most of all, this story is about hope. Even in the face of fire and destruction, humanity's instinct to protect one another shines through. The family may have lost their home, but they kept what truly matters: their lives and their love for each other. This story is such a beautiful reminder that everyday people can rise to extraordinary heights when others need them most. If you found today's story as inspiring as I did, please give it a like, subscribe to SecretSpool, and share it with a friend who could use some hope in their feed. I'm Tessa, and this has been your Feel Good Friday. Take care, and I'll see you next time.